All right, everybody, gather in. We're going to call this March 28th meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee to order. It is 1:30. Roll call. Chris is here.
Chris is here.
Cindy is here. Dave is here. We have a quorum. Great.
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. We'll start off with a presentation by staff or consultant for a business item, and then after that, the committee will give you a chance to discuss it. After that, the public will be invited to comment.
And take note, Mr. Okay. Here we have an approved agenda. Move to approve.
Second.
Any changes? Any objections? The agenda is approved. Okay, we have before us the meeting minutes, I believe, from December 20th, is that right? 2018 for approval. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second. Any changes or discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the meeting minutes for December 20th, 2019 are approved. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5A, Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan.
I'll start, and then this acting will back cleanup, or even better. Join us. So the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan is a federally required plan for folks who are receiving the federal funds inside your entity, your area, and you're one of those. And so we started this last year, early last year.
March.
And did a nice process going out to the public and making sure we're doing what we're supposed to audit. We had a public comment period this January, and you should have those public comments before you. This did go to the Technical Advisory Committee at their February meeting, and they requested that staff take a second look at the public comment period, or the public comment response summary, and take a second pass at the responses from staff. So Aaron and I met with Jamie and Bart from Transit, went through all of them, and came up with some fine-tuned the answers a little bit. And so they're before you today. Keep in mind that our process, typically what we've done is the comment response summary that you have, and we haven't changed the document yet. We want to make sure that we get the approval from you before we check the document based on what the comments are. So, what large amounts did I miss?
So this is an AMATS secondary plan, so it's not one of the primary plans. So the effort that was led this is a labor of love. When I started in 2009 with Transit, the first document that I got to start with was the Coordinated Transportation Plan, and then when I was at AMATS, it was ready for an update, so we did the update, and then I had a role change, for those of you that didn't know that, and now the Director of Public Transportation. So I took it back to Transit with me to finish the plan, and here we are today. So the TAC has had a chance to review it. Like Craig said, we went through the comments, fine-tuned them, and basically right now what you have before you is a document that meets the state's required elements and FTA's required elements for FTA 5310 funds, which is specifically for individuals with disabilities and seniors. So it's a very small pot of money that can only be used for those activities as it relates to public transportation. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the committee? John?
Is this the final step for it?
This is the final step for this plan. Yes.
Just a comment. I participated in three total of the community workshops on the CHSTP effort. And while I regret we weren't able to come up with a catchier name, I can report that the community engagement and involvement in the three that I attended was very impressive for something that is a secondary AMATS plan. And I just want to commend all the staff and consultants who worked on it. I was very impressed with the process. So, just my 2 cents.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? comments or questions from the public? Okay. Move to the committee.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay, item 5B, AMATS CAC Resolution 001-2019, Artillery Road interchange or reconstruction. Craig?
Yes, Mr. Chair, our Citizen Advisory Committee met at their last meeting, which was last month, or the month before, we just met recently. And one of the things they talked about that was the integrated corridor management study that was an AMATS funded project in, I believe, funding was in the TIP in 2017. And so that project has been completed, and there are a couple of recommendations in there that they, the CAC has asked to carry forward. We took those two resolutions before the AMATS Technical Committee last week, or like 2 weeks ago, and they recommended forwarding this particular one on. So what this basically is, one of the projects in that integrated corridor management talks about the reconstruction of the Artillery Road interchange. And that project is a project that, because of the scope and cost and all that sort of stuff, would not be something we would typically fund the AMATS allocation. It would take up several years worth of the entire AMATS allocation. But they wanted to make sure that they passed along that this was a very important project to them. And so what the resolution is asking you to do is, and it's kind of odd, you as the chair of the committee and the rest of the committee, in your position as Central Region Director, basically we're asking you to send a resolution to yourself saying, hey, state, this is a big priority, and we'd like the state to see that as a priority, and AMATS is wanting to express that they believe very strongly that this is a good project, and we'd like you to add it to your program.
So just to be clear here, this is not asking us to prioritize it, this is asking us to make it the number one priority for future funding, if I read this right.
Correct. Number one priority.
Number one priority for future funding in this DIP. So, again, it's not an allocation that AMATS controls, obviously. It's the state's NHS pot of funding. I would guess that's how that would be funded, but this is a request from AMATS to say, hey, we want you to make sure, we want to make sure you understand that we believe this is really super important.
So I think I will recuse myself from voting on this one, since it's coming to me. I'm happy my lawyer looking at
Well,
it.
we could, you know, AMATS could send it to the DOT commissioner as well, we could send it to the governor.
Sure.
It's just basically, it's
No, that's fine.
send the letter to DOT. so.
Right. Okay, so, yes, sir. John?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It says that this will expand alternate route options. I was wondering how it would do that.
I may have to defer to some of our DOT folks, see if they have an answer to that. I don't remember, or Aaron, do you know exactly? I don't remember, I don't have the study in front of me to know what that might be looking at.
No. I think a lot of that was just taken from the ICM study itself. The language was pulled directly from the ICM study. One of the things to note here is that the ICM study was pretty limited in its focus, and as you see here, we don't say, this resolution doesn't say build what's in the ICM study, but build an interchange reconstruction of Artillery Road, which would include, hopefully, non-motorized improvements in the area. In terms of alternate route options, I don't know. Maybe it's link it up to any frontage roads that exist in the future, and help if roundabouts are done, for example, it makes it easier to connect to the frontage roads that exist there.
Well, I was hoping that they were trying to find alternate routes in case someone happens to hit an overpass again or something.
So, Pete, just for clarification, that whole study does a lot of that. There's two different things it's doing. One of them is, and you guys correct me if I'm off base here, but one of them is to look at exactly what you're talking about. The other one is more long-term fixes to some of those intersections. But the short term is to figure out how can we go around bridges in a short term. So it's doing both.
Okay.
It's right.
All right, thank you.
Any other? Yes.
So they're asking for it to be the number one priority. I don't recall off the top of my head, what is the priority currently?
Well, depends on who's talking to us. The number,
I am.
Midtown.
You don't count.
Yeah, I mean, as far as prioritizing projects, I'm sorry, Todd Van Ho, Department of Transportation. As far as programming projects in the STIP as priorities, they're really, on the NHS, the first thing we use is a scoring criteria, and then the highest scored project becomes the highest priority that gets added to the STIP, similar to the TIP, which is a new process for us. But right now, our scored projects that we have, the number one scoring project that we have is replacing the Tudor Bridge. But we also have in our program a PEL study that's going to start on artillery and Highland as well. So those are priority projects for us, and artillery and replacement of artillery and the replacement of Highland are both in the top 5 of our priorities of unfunded projects in the STIP right now. And they're both going forward for the Amendment 3, which we're currently working on.
As a follow-up, so if it's currently, I hear two things. One, it is currently part of the evaluation tools. It's ranked based on criteria, number one. Number two, I hear that there's also the DEL project/process that's in the works. Is that higher ranked?
That one's funded and underway.
So it's underway.
Yes.
So is it safe to say that just arbitrarily saying that something that could be a part of that could be a project included in the PEL, should just automatically be bumped to the top of the list without seeing the results of the PEL is premature? Should we wait until the PEL?
Correct. We won't recommend any other projects until the PEL's finished. I mean, what we do is we'll put the funding for the PEL, and then we follow that up with a design phase. We'll assume that a PEL is going to take 2 years, and then we automatically put a design hit 2 years after the start of the PEL so that we can make sure that the project is continuing. And then based on the design, we'll determine when we ask for money for the phase 4 of the construction.
John.
So I guess in summer, you're already doing what this says to do.
Yes.
I mean, we have another priority, but they're all being done at the same time.
Correct.
Forward, right?
Yes.
So this is spot on, but not necessary.
Absolutely. I think we're already doing exactly what you guys are asking for at this time.
Anybody? Doesn't matter.
Any other comments from the committee? Comments from the public?
Jim Ammons, the Chief Iowa Design. I would say that an endorsement such as this does help us when it's being scored and rescored at the state level. So there is some goodness to be had by you guys approving this.
And just a clarification on what I was saying before. When I say there's different priorities, I didn't mean for us. I mean for different AMATS. Their highest priority is Connect Goose Bay Road right now. Anchorage has a different priority. So there's all these different entities that have different priorities, and the STIP is a way to kind of get that stable. So, any other comments from the public? Okay, what's the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second. Any objections? Motion passes. Okay, are there any other action items, I don't believe? No, sir. Moving on to agenda item 6, project and plan update, right?
We'll share information on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We held a work session with the committees, the Policy Committee, the TAC, and the Citizens Advisory on March 11th. And we were given a nod to go ahead and model what we had presented, and we're in the process of it right now. We have some immediate results that we're still tweaking to make sure we've got the coding right for, and Mr. Lyon will be contacting you all to poll for another follow-on work session. We would dearly love to get this out, approved, to go ahead and release it to the public in May. I don't know that that's going to be possible, but that would be our desired goal. Otherwise, we're looking at a public meeting in the summertime, which is not the best, but we'll have to live with that. So, and I'd also, excuse me, yes?
Go ahead.
I'd also like to mention that we do have a public involvement plan, we do have a public process, and using the Citizens Advisory Committee at this stage, where we are right now, is the appropriate step for us to take. When we have the modeled results, and when we have tech memo number 3, which is the alternatives with the preferred alternative, then we'll be taking out that information to the general public.
So I'd just like to say on a personal note, both you and Aaron, that was a challenging meeting. And I appreciate you getting through it all. It was a lot of, we ran you through the hoops on that one. I realize that, but you did a good job, both of you. Really good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any comments or questions, John?
So thinking later, and I think Aaron, you might have spoken, you said in the modeling, you did not model local roads. Is that right? And is that, just tell me again why that is.
AMATS has typically funded roads collector and above. At one time, we were looking at grouping a group of projects together for secondary access for emergency response in a group of projects, and this was back in 2006. I did a lot of work with Chugiak Eagle River at that time, and that could have included local road connections also, but that effort didn't really move forward. It lost steam at the time. The public wasn't ready to move forward with that. But I do think that for that one reason alone, for secondary access for emergency response, is a good reason, could be a good reason for AMATS to look at local roads. If this body desires to do that.
Can I follow up on that? Is it, I don't know if this really impacts our discussion here, but it's important. Because that's an important issue with after the earthquake, potential for wildfire, all those
Yes.
emergency connections are very critical. And so, so it is okay to use AMATS funds for that kind of thing, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Of course, there's a match required.
Right.
So for those areas, I know there are discussions going on right now about different options for that. But there may be better ways to do that than to put it in the AMATS funding. But if that doesn't pan out for some reason, it could be an option to group some projects together and nominate them for the MTP and TIP funding.
Okay, so that alone is important. Now, a separate thing for the modeling, if we have a variety of road projects that complete or kind of get more connectivity within some local area,
Yes.
well, then it would take a load off of collector roads potentially and arterials and so on.
Yes.
But that's not factored in. I mean, are we missing, does that leave a big hole or that's just not significant?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, we have this notion of completing the grid, and if you complete the grid, then you
Yes.
just drive around your neighborhood and you never leave it, so there's less traffic on the highway. So if that philosophy is correct and followed, then it does impact your higher order roads, but that won't be shown in the model. Is that correct?
So a quick clarification, we do have local roads in the model because they're part of the network. What I guess maybe didn't come across clear in the work session was we don't have any local roads in our MTP project list. Because historically, AMATS has only funded collector and above. Because the use of federal funds on local roads tends to get really expensive and impactful and long-term, and you run into time traps and all this other kind of stuff. So when we said it wasn't going to model local roads, it's because we didn't have anything to model because we don't have local roads in our project list.
Okay.
But we do factor it in because you're right, it is important. And one of the things we actually have in the tip, sorry, I'm really animated about this, is actually looking at secondary road connection, an actual project for it, because in certain areas it's recognized there's not a completion of the secondary road network. And it may be impacting some of the more primary or bigger roads.
Okay, good. That filled in my knowledge. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? And just for the record, I've never seen you not animated about anything. Any other comments or questions from the public? Okay. Moving on to item 7, proposed regarding the Air Quality Advisory Committee seat on TAP. Craig?
Yes. So we have had an Air Quality Advisory Committee seat on our Technical Advisory Committee since at least the 2000 update to the operating agreement. Obviously, it was there before. Air quality, as I always say, is the hammer that the feds have to make sure if you're, not, again, in layman's terms, not polluting too much, et cetera. So when we move from a non-attainment area to limited maintenance, the requirements for all of our efforts lowered in some areas. Certainly in our air quality, we used to have to model every single project in the tip individually. We used to do a lot of extra work. So there was a lot of effort that was put forth by that Air Quality Advisory Committee. They don't have that requirement quite so much anymore. That committee hasn't met in probably 2 years, and we have not had a representative from the Air Quality Committee come to our technical committee in about that same amount of time. So we've had an 11-member committee with always one member short of getting a quorum. In other words, it's been 10 people to draw from and not 11. So, we've talked about this before as we're trying to figure out how to fill that seat and whether we should add someone from a different entity in town here. And one of the solution that we've come up with, which I think is a pretty good solution, we ran it by the Technical Advisory Committee, and we thought it was good too, is to choose a person from our Citizens Advisory Committee to serve in that spot. There have been suggestions about rotating between the advisory committees before, but you know what it's like to jump into something that you have never dealt with before in your life, and you're attempting to climb that steep wall of knowledge. That's how I felt when I started. I'm sure even with your background in engineering, you're coming into the NEPA process, it was all Greek. So the idea would be if we get someone from the Citizens Advisory Committee and get them for their consistent period of time, they will become a good community member as well. We have a really good Citizens Advisory Committee right now. It's got someone from every assembly seat. It's got someone from JBER and someone from the 2 different chambers of commerce, Chugaki River and Anchorage. And so it's a really good mix. And so our suggestion would be that we do that. We would change the operating agreement to add, to change the part where it talks about the Air Quality Committee, and it just talks about the Citizens Advisory Committee and one person being on the TAC. So we would like to bring that to you next month as a specific proposal. We just wanted to broach the subject with you today and see if there's any, no, that's a crazy idea, please go back to the drawing board sort of thing.
Comments or
It's
questions?
just an informational today.
Doesn't seem that crazy.
This came up, we talked about this years ago.
It did. Mr. Morris was suggesting rotating between the BPAC and
Well,
the
I
Freight
just
Committee, et
thought,
cetera.
I just said the Citizens Advisory when we first set it up.
If we had just listened. That's usually the way that works.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the public? Yes, sir.
I'm Andrew Ohms with Kilson Associates. I'm the vice chair on the Air Quality Committee, and I can confirm that we haven't met in 2 years. As a result, I can't speak for that committee, but in general, I would support a more active, engaged member of the technical committee.
Good stuff. Thank you. All right, any other information?
The last thing just to mention is the tip criteria. So as you remember when we adopted the last tip, we had an agreement that after we adopted the tip, we would start a longer process of looking at the current tip criteria and do an update of those as a standalone thing as opposed to in the middle of updating the tip and do a quick version of those criteria. So we started that process. We did just get the tip officially approved by Federal Highways last month. It took a little longer than we were expecting, but we kind of wanted to get that final completely approved. So we've started this process of looking at our peer groups, the NPO around the country to see what they're doing and working with some folks that Mr. Weldon was connected to that look at tip criteria. So we've had one initial meeting and we'll do some more. And so just updating you that we have started that process.
Are you still going to plan on releasing the public comment, the draft, when we're working?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be a very, again, this will be updating the tip criteria, having nothing to do with updating the tip. So it will be just the criteria. So we'll have, hopefully we'll have at least a work session or a workshop, maybe an open house, and then we'll have criteria up for public review for a long period of time and really get a sense of what we're doing.
John?
to say, so I use some of my scarce assembly funds for these things that are Meredith Noble to look at it, so she'll be working on it. Because everyone knows it's very important to me to look at this, but I don't have time to do it. She's smarter and better at it.
What's the scope of the project?
Basically, what they started a month or so ago doing kind of a literature review thing, and just saying what's out there, what would be good, and I think I've made very clear, I want to see more emphasis on what are our broader community goals and how can AMATS money be used to fund that. And so that's kind of my direction. She's looking at it somewhat from there, but I think it was a very good meeting. She reported back, and I think staff is on board and we're going to come up with something good. So I'm optimistic, but that's just where she fits in. If you want.
Yeah, we're always, whenever we do these tip updates, we're always under a tight pressure. It's like, well, we got these out, this, that, and the other. So it's nice to be able to just go, all right, we're just going to concentrate on this. And it's not a tip update at the same time. So, very cool.
Any other comments from the committee? Any comments from the public? Okay, this is going to be my last AMATS meeting. I'm retiring here in April. So I'd like to thank Chris for helping me get through some Gordian knots while I was trying to figure out which agenda item we were on. He was helping me with that. And Cindy for helping me with Robert's Rules of Order, which I still don't quite understand. The amendments to the amendments. But anyway, it's been a pleasure working with all of you. It's good work here. And Wolfgang will be taking over this seat. So give him a hard time for at least the first 3 or 4 months.
Oh, yeah.
You can manage.
Yeah.
Okay, and the meeting is adjourned at